everyone, happy Tuesday and welcome to my channel. My name is Dawn and this channel is Dawn Does Keto. This channel is all about my accountability and my personal weight loss journey on the ketogenic diet. I'm so happy that you're here. Today is going to be an episode of Dinner with Dawn, but before I do that, I just want to give you a quick update of what I'm doing today. I'm going to show you really quickly how I make my fat coffee because I've had some people ask about that, and just show you real quick what I'm having for lunch. Now, I've already been over to my mother and father-in-law's house. I did that first thing this morning, but I have a nail appointment at 1 o'clock, so I came home to get some things done. You might be able to hear my dryer going in the background, I'm not sure, because I'm doing some laundry and getting some little things done around the house. I'm going to read my chapter in the book because I haven't done that yet, so that will get done before I head to my nail appointment, but it is afternoon, so I can break my fast, so I'll show you real quick what I'm having for lunch. The first thing I do is I add 2 tablespoons of butter to my coffee mug. I just use this Great Value breakfast blend. And I brew my coffee right over top of the butter to help melt that and get it softened up. And then I add 1 scoop of unflavored collagen. This is the Thrive Market brand is what I use. I add 1 dropper full of the KetOH-IO electrolyte drops, 1 raw egg, and then today I'm going to put in just a little capful of this Jordan skinny syrup, the cookie dough. I just want a little sweeter coffee today. I don't normally do that, but I'm just putting in, I don't know if you guys can see that. I don't know if that would be like a teaspoon, I'm not really sure. And then I'm going to take my frother and I'm just going to give this a really good mix. And then I have shown you guys before what a nice froth that egg and the butter add to your coffee. So I haven't had a chance to make any hard-boiled eggs, and Mike and I are out of baggy bacon. So just very quickly here, I am going to have these turkey roll-ups. It's turkey breast lunch meat with some salami with a habanero jack cheese stick rolled in it with a little bit of mustard. Sorry, it doesn't look very pretty, but my mustard container was at the end and it's just like spitting. And then I'm also going to have one of these keto ratio yogurts. And then I will be taking my electrolyte tablet and my vitamin K2 plus D3. They recommend you take this with fat. So I usually wait until I have my coffee when I break my fast, and that's when I take these. So I'll be doing that. I also wanted to show you guys really quickly, Mike and I are going to have chicken quesadillas for dinner tonight. And I found this chicken at Aldi. It's Southwest style seasoned chicken. And the ingredients are super clean. It's boneless, skinless chicken breast, water, olive oil, contains 2% or less of spices, salt, carrageenan, xanthan gum, granulated onions, sodium phosphate, paprika, granulated garlic, sodium acetate, and sodium diacetate. So we are going to slice this up and make chicken quesadillas on the Blackstone tonight. Good evening, everyone. It's 8:45, so it's way past
my bedtime.
Our eating window. It's way past our eating window. We did not get out to do our walk until late.
Everything has been late. The whole day has been nothing but late. What can we say?
It was dark and it was cold.
Bitter cold.
So when we got home, neither one of us had had a chance to read the chapter for today. So I sat down to read and I read the wrong chapter.
Oh yeah. So then she says, "Hey, it's your turn to read." So we swapped out and then I started reading, and then
I was
all
in there.
of a sudden
I went ahead and started dinner. We decided to cook in the house because it's so cold outside. So we were going to make quesadillas on the Blackstone. We just cooked them in the house so they're more like chicken burritos. I'm just going to show you guys real quick. So we just have like the chicken I showed you guys earlier with some cheese and the egg life wraps, but we ended up cooking them in the house. So I was in the other room cooking up the chicken in a skillet and Mike was reading.
The wrong chapter because I was following suit. And then the light bulb went off and she says, wait a minute. And she comes in and we look, and sure enough, we skipped a chapter. So we had to go back and read the previous chapter, the correct one. But the nice thing about it is the chapter we had to read was shorter, and now we got a jump start on the next Dinner with Mike and Dawn.
I also put a little bit of sour cream on mine. Oops, I'm losing my chicken. So we're both starving. If you're new to our channel, we are doing a segment on our channel every Tuesday and Thursday that's called Dinner with Dawn.
And Mike?
Yep. And we are reading this book because I had some people ask. This is The Case Against Sugar by Gary Taubes. And we are on chapter 4. So real quick before we jump into the chapter, I showed you guys earlier what I had to eat. Do you want to tell everyone what you ate today for lunch?
So yesterday for dinner we had roast. It was day 2 of roast. And after we were finished eating dinner, there was still enough left over that I could take to work today and have for lunch. So I had the remaining roast and all of the broth. I drank it all. I love broth. I love gravy and broth. So anytime we have roast or anything that basically cooks in its own juices, I devour them because I love them so much. But I had that. I had taken some pork rinds, but I did not eat them. I had taken some cashews. I did not eat those. I ended up only eating the roast and the juice because by the time I finished that, I was full. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That was a 5-pound roast. It was really large.
Right.
So we ate it for 2 days for both of us, and then you having that at work today.
Mm-hmm.
I showed you guys earlier the chicken that we used on these. I got from Aldi. It's really good.
No, it's very good.
It has a lot of flavor to it.
Yes. And the seasonings and the marinade that they put it in keeps the whole thing moist so it's not dried out, and it's really, really good.
So I'm going to start off today's chapter, and I'm just going to read you like the first little paragraph because it's really short and it'll kind of be an introduction to what this chapter's about. The chapter's called A Peculiar Evil. In 1937, C.W. Barron, then the owner of the Wall Street Journal, made the pithy observation that if we want to make money in this stock market, we should invest in companies that provide us with our vices. In hard times, consumers will give up a lot of necessities, he said, but the last thing they will give up is their vices. That's right out of the gate, and that just hits you in the face. It's like, we'll give up a lot of things, but if we're addicted to something, and we've talked about this throughout this whole book, if we're addicted to something, we're going to go out of our way to have it.
Absolutely, and we're going to see as the chapter goes on evidence to prove that theory. There were similar observations made about that, and in England, they had a decade of unparalleled depression. An observation was made of what was called cheap luxuries, and it was termed the peculiar evil. The peculiar evil is this, and this is paraphrasing, but you want something a little bit tasty because at that point in time, because the economy was so bad, you couldn't get the normal things that you ate because things were so expensive and people couldn't purchase them. You want something a little bit tasty, there is always some cheaply pleasant thing to tempt you. And we've talked about the price of sugar, and we've talked about how cheap it was and how easy it was to make and process and give to the public. That was just one small observation made during the recessions and depressions of England back in, it doesn't give you a year, but I'm going to guess it was probably in the early 1900s.
The sugar industry, regardless of how hard the times were, was depression proof. People were still eating candy, ice cream, drinking soft drinks. Annual per capita sugar consumption in the depth of the Great Depression, so during like the worst time, was 16 pounds higher than it had been in 1920. Candy consumption climbed steadily through the Depression, so it increased.
Right. It was the only thing people could eat because it was cheap.
Companies like Coke and Pepsi thrived during the Depression when nobody had any money.
Yep.
So it is mind-boggling.
There is always some cheaply pleasant thing to tempt you. During the Depression, money was hard to come by and people couldn't eat normal food. They were breakfasting on Coca-Cola and rolls, sometimes just Coca-Cola alone. Why? Because there is always some cheaply pleasant things to tempt you. I keep going back to that because as we continue through this chapter, that is like the bottom line. Times were hard, times were tough. And as Dawn mentioned already, and you'll see it again, sugar consumption skyrocketed of all the things. They even made a comment in here that until the second to last year of the 20th century, the one certainty over all that time period was that sugar consumption increased.
Yeah.
They go into a whole part of this chapter about supply and demand. I don't know that we're going to get real deep into that, other than to say that it didn't matter. When the supply was high and prices came down, they continued to make it and people continued to consume it. When the supply was down and demand was high and they couldn't get what they wanted, they found ways to make it, and they still found ways to get it to the people. They wanted that over the other things that they could have. The consumption never changed. The desire for it, the passion to get it, never waned. It continued to grow and increase.
So then it starts talking about the Sugar Act in 1930. Congress passed.
Oh yeah, the government.
The Sugar Act.
The government couldn't keep their hands out of it. I mean, clearly, I'm sure they were raking in the money with taxes, and this is common today. I mean, farmers get subsidies, and we overproduce things, and you end up taking a hit, right? Because you produce more than you can sell, and so the government comes in and compensates you so that you don't lose money. And they did the same thing with sugar.
You can grow this, and if you don't sell it, we'll still compensate you for it. So of course then they're going to grow more because they're going to make money no matter what. And it talks about how President Franklin Roosevelt was calling the sugar lobby, according to the New York Times, the most powerful pressure group that had descended on the national capital during his lifetime. The Sugar Act effectively guaranteed that producing and refining sugar in the United States would always be a profitable business. They also talk about sugar being in candy, soda, and in paint.
Another who knew?
Yeah, sugar is an essential ingredient in paint. Now, we're not eating that, obviously, but I still didn't know that.
I don't know why it doesn't go into that, but it was just a little side note that I thought was, again, unreal. Who would have ever thought that sugar was an essential ingredient in paint?
Right.
The Sugar Act also allowed for subsidies to be paid to producers, either for the sugar that they didn't produce or the sugar they produced but couldn't sell. Again, they do that today with the American farmer in a lot of cases, not all cases, but.
It talks about how technology continued to advance the sales of sugar, and one of the, inventions that helped that was the vending machine.
So that allowed, especially like Coke and Pepsi, to sell cold, chilled beverages, sugar beverages, right? So now you can go into a store and you can buy it cold. And the vending machine, because of its ability to chill, they were called electric coolers at the time, led to another invention that made sales of sugary products skyrocket. That invention was the refrigerator. Think about that. What does the refrigerator do in this point in time with all of these products that are made out of sugar? It brings them into the home. You can now purchase sugary items and you don't have to consume them immediately. You can now bring them home into the home and store them for an extended period of time.
Right, so it says by 1935, refrigerators could be purchased for well under $200, and 1.5 million were sold that year alone. For the first time in history, consumers could easily indulge in ice-cold soft drinks and ice cream without leaving their homes. That's when Coke and Pepsi started selling their soft drinks in a 6-pack.
Yeah, think about that. I mean, we take it for granted now because, we see it every day. But this started that, and all it did was just jack up sales and production and refining of sugar and sugar-related products. Unbelievable.
So it says in the 6 years leading up to America's entry into the Second World War, soft drink sales in the United States nearly quadrupled from 200 million to 750 million cases per year. And that was all because of the refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that they started bundling it together, you wouldn't go and just buy a single bottle of Coke, you'd buy a 12-pack of Coke. So then we jump ahead in the First World War, and there was a temporary shortage of sugar, and there was sugar rationing, which began in 1942.
Yeah, the interesting thing about this sugar shortage was that because some of the countries involved in World War II that were the major producers, they couldn't produce. And even in the U.S., a lot of that stuff was being turned to the war effort, used primarily for explosives and synthetic rubber. So there's just more uses of the sugar and sugar products that, to help fund the war. But what's funny about this is that started in 1942, and by 1945, only 3 years later, because of the shortage, American civilians were expected to get by on levels of sugar consumption that hadn't been seen since the 1870s. Now listen to this. Only 70 pounds per year. And I'm guessing, because it doesn't say, but I'm guessing that's per person. Only 70 pounds per year. Economists at the time were calling it the worst sugar famine in history. We can only get 70 pounds per person. Really? And that was just civilians. And why do I say that? Because we're going to see what the war effort ended up doing for the sugar industry and how the government, again, played a part in that. So a lot of that sugar that was not being consumed by the American public because of the war was because they were shifting all those sugar products and sugar allotments to the war effort. They had 11 million servicemen, right, in the armed forces. 220 pounds per capita yearly for just the Army alone. They were sending that stuff overseas to the soldiers, and we mentioned this in a previous video because my father served in Vietnam and explained some of this to me about the fact that when they were over there, that's what the government sent them.
Yeah.
Stuff that was addicting and that was cheaply made, and they could send over in mass quantities, for them to consume.
And those amounts that they were sending them were twice the amount the soldiers were eating pre-war. So they were just loading them up with sugar. It says towards the end of the war, authorities were touting the value of sugar and candy as stimulants to make our warriors more effective in combat.
I mean, what are they going to do? The servicemen and the soldiers overseas, what are they going to do? It's all they have. They have to eat. They got to stay alive.
It's candy bars constituted 40% of the food that the servicemen were purchasing and eating. That's like half of your food was just candy.
Just eating candy. And I'm sure the rest of it was cigarettes because I know that was another big thing that they sent over there. They did this campaign because of the soldiers being over there because they didn't want to undermine the war. They didn't want to undermine the soldier. It was suggested that this campaign was to correct popular misinformation that candy is fattening and causes tooth decay. So they were already starting the lie because they didn't want people to look at it in a negative light.
And again, you hear that for a long period of time and that lie becomes truth. And that's basically what it was. All the advertising and just repeating of that lie through the years just made people, they don't believe that sugar's bad because they've heard all this information for years.
Yeah, and candy bars and candy weren't the only things. Coke and Pepsi jumped on board too during the war effort. They actually made their products available. I think Coke made their products available to anywhere in the world, servicemen anywhere in the world, for a nickel a bottle. They didn't care if they took a loss on it because they wanted people to drink it. And I mean, if you think about it,
they come home from the war and then they need it because they're fully addicted to it.
Right.
Pepsi even opened centers for the servicemen that stayed open past midnight and served 2 million men in the first year of operation.
That's like your first all-night convenience store, except it strictly sold Pepsi products. Now, I don't know if they had to buy them, but it provided it for the servicemen, right?
Yeah.
And, you're fighting the war, you're running through the jungle, you're weary, you're tired, and all of a sudden there's a glow up on the hill, and you go up and there's a Pepsi service center where you can go in and get a Pepsi. I know it sounds funny, but I mean, that's kind of what it was. It was like, hey, look, it's not a mirage. It's a bottle of Pepsi and Coke, and here you are. This is our appreciation for your war efforts and what you're doing for our country. So let's addict you to sugar-based, water. There's more. It goes well beyond just the soda and the sugar
Mike
water.
said that this was one of those chapters where he wanted to highlight the whole chapter, and we really have to limit what we talk about, and it makes it very difficult because otherwise the video is going to be over an hour.
The provisions of Coke and Pepsi for servicemen, for the 11 million GIs that were fighting in World War II, if they hadn't trucked or flew or sent over all that pop and all that soda to that many people, to get that many people to drink those beverages would have taken over 25 years and millions of dollars. And they did it for virtually nothing, and they did it in such a short amount of time that you can't drug that many people at one time. And that's basically what it was. But what I found interesting, this more fantastic, just unbelievable things that came out of this. So, World War II was about communism, obviously Nazi Germany. Listen to this. If you don't have the book, you got to get it. It's phenomenal. But if you do have it, you read this, you probably just shook your head in disbelief. When Coke hosted its first international convention 3 years after the war ended, one of their executives described the purpose to serve those 2 billion customers who are already waiting for us to bring product to them. So like I said, it was just like an expedited provision for them. And the quote was, when we think of communism, we think of the Iron Curtains. And if you think about that, the Iron Curtain was in the middle of communism. But when they think of democracy, are they going to think the U.S.? Are they going to think of America and freedom? No. they're going to think of Coca-Cola. And it's probably the most clever advertising campaign that they didn't have to pay for. It was already funded by the U.S. government in the form of a war effort. It's fascinating. And you know, when I was younger, I wasn't this interested in history. But if we had learned stuff like this, I probably would have been. This is unbelievable, and it's fascinating at the same time.
So post-war, the sugar consumption was rebounding because there was no longer a shortage. Soft drinks, candy, ice cream, and everything regularly hit new highs, constantly outdoing themselves and selling more.
Well, you had all these soldiers coming home that were addicted to the sugar, had these new products that they'd never had before, or maybe only had once or twice or something, but it was a daily staple in their lives. So now they come home, what do you think they want?
Now enters the sugary breakfast. During Prohibition, they had to do something with like all the extra grapes and everything like that, so they made concentrated fruit juices. So people started consuming these concentrated fruit juices and really sugary breakfast cereals. That became the new normal.
Yeah, fruit juices went through the roof because when you couldn't buy alcohol, I mean, again, American ingenuity, what are we going to do? Let's make a fruit juice. Bam, big hit. Same thing, sugar, people drinking it for breakfast. And then, of course, like Dawn said, here comes the breakfast cereal, which
accompanies it.
Right. And initially, breakfast cereals were sugar-free. And so guess what that meant? They were bland and they didn't taste all that great.
And so sales were down. They weren't selling as much of it as they wanted to.
Oh, by the way, as we were reading this too, not only grapes, but oranges. So down in like Florida and California and stuff, during years where they had a surplus, generally, what are they going to do with it?
Yeah, the oranges go bad. And
right, because they don't know what to do with it. But now, all of a sudden, there's this fruit juice craze. Now orange juice becomes a big thing.
Right.
And now we have a whole new product line of sugar. Now, it's natural sugar, but it's still sugar nonetheless.
It says by 1980, according to the USDA estimates, Americans were drinking over 7.5 gallons of fruit juice a year. And by the late 1990s, when the trend peaked, over 9 gallons, roughly equivalent to drinking an additional 8 pounds of sugar per year.
And by the way, this new fruit juice era was called the era of new nutrition because it was fruit-based. So there we go. This is about the time when they decided that vitamin C, about how important it was to have vitamin C.
They started pushing that.
And some of the illnesses that you could eliminate or avoid by getting certain vitamins and nutrients that were in fruit, overlooking and neglecting the negative effects of sugar, which I'll give them, they didn't know all of those things yet, but clearly it had been discovered that with the rise in consumption of sugar, there was a lot of new illnesses and health issues that were coming about.
Right.
So here's a trivia question for those of you out there that don't have the book and didn't read the chapter, so you don't already know the answer to this. But what do you think the first breakfast cereal, one of the first breakfast cereals ever made was? And we used to eat it, and it's not that good. Even today, it's not that good. But Post Grape Nuts.
They used to break your teeth.
I mean, you try and chew those things and bust your teeth in a million pieces.
Yeah.
But that was one of the first ones, and it was originally made with molasses and maltose, but there was no sugar. It was a sugar-free cereal. And it was touted as a health cereal because outside the fact that we didn't know about the grain and that whole thing, but, I mean, it didn't have sugar on it. Well, that soon changed.
Yeah, so a gentleman named Jim Rex, he was actually a Philadelphia heating equipment salesman. He had this thought one day. He was watching his children sitting there eating the cereal, and they were taking spoonfuls of sugar and dumping it on their cereal to make it taste better. So
right, which we did with grape nuts because it was awful.
Yeah. And he saw that, and this cracks me up because he says it sickened him to see the sugary excess. So he began to think of ways he could get his kids to eat their cereal without plunging into the sugar bowl. And his solution was, let's go ahead and just put the sugar on the cereal. Like, that makes a difference.
Ahead of time, yeah.
Yeah. So they'll eat less sugar on it if it's already on there.
Well, I mean, so think about that for a minute. That's the thought process, right? If we sugarcoat it from the beginning, then it's a controlled amount of sugar on the cereal. But here's the thing. Now, I personally never did this, but I can guarantee you a lot of kids did.
I always used to put sugar on my oatmeal.
Right.
Like we would have just the plain like steel cut oatmeal and it had no flavor to it. And we would put sugar in it and we'd pour milk on it and everything to just like
all those healthy things.
Yeah.
But what I was getting at is even though the cereal was already pre-sugared, I can guarantee you that there were kids out there that still put sugar on their cereal.
Right.
Just because they knew it was going to taste good.
So this made me laugh too. So in 1950, Kellogg's released sugar corn pops. Even though most of the company's stock was still held by W.K. Kellogg Foundation, it was a charitable organization established to promote children's health and education.
And yet here they are entering the market, the sugar-coated cereal market, because they had to. There were like 3 or 4 cereal companies, and some of them were resistant to this. Like they didn't want to do that because they, I think they knew. But
it was like, we either do this or we go out of business.
We go under. And so they all jumped on board. And the next thing you know, there was like this explosion of copycat cereals. That's why if you go back and look at some of the cereals that the different companies make, like Sugar Crisp originally, and then
Sugar
Smacks. 2 different companies, same exact cereal.
Yeah.
And it was just a way to compete. And there's a ton of them. I mean, we could sit here and go through all the cereals. They list a lot of them in this chapter. Obviously, we're not going to do that. But the idea is that breakfast cereal was like nothing, and then sugar just exploded it and made it become just a big money-making machine. And they targeted women and children. And of course, children were they were the ones that really were affected negatively by this whole campaign because you hooked.
Yeah, think about it. All of the mascots for cereal are like kid-friendly characters. Tony the Tiger, and you got
Diggum, the frog from Sugar Smacks.
Yeah, and a lot of them became
Sugar Bear.
A lot of them became Saturday morning cartoon characters.
Oh yeah.
So then they would see him in the cartoons and then see him on the box of cereal, and it's like,
advertising.
Yeah, it was actually brilliant if you think about it.
Oh yeah, entertaining and advertising at the same time. I mean, it opened the floodgates, and the kids want it, parents are going to buy it. Money's going to be made. And generations. Because when we were kids, we used to I'd eat 2 or 3 bowls of cereal and read the box. And of course, they had the characters on there and they would do, different things on it would keep your attention. And they did generations and generations of kids.
Then they added toys
to
the cereal boxes.
Yeah,
they don't even talk about that. But I would literally buy a specific cereal because I wanted what was in the box. So it was like, I have to have that.
The consumption of cereals did finally start to slow down, and that might have been a ploy for them to continue to sell cereal, but nonetheless, they did their damage.
Right.
I mean, they had, I can't even tell you, countless of millions of kids who grew up, eating that food. And it wasn't just on the weekends, it was every day.
Yeah. It says here that Kellogg's failed to produce a sugar-coated oat cereal, so instead of sugar, they decided to turn to chocolate.
Well, instead of oats.
Yeah, instead of oats, they were going to make a bittersweet chocolate that was good and healthy and wouldn't be harmful to children. But the sales were not good on that. So what did they do? They took that chocolate cereal and they added even more sugar to it. So now we have the chocolate and the sugar together.
Right.
So over the next 20 years, the cereal industry creates dozens of sugar-coated cereals, some with half their calories derived from sugar.
50% of the calories derived from sugar alone.
Yeah.
I mean, you're basically buying a box of sugar. And we bought it like mad, and we ate it like crazy. We did the same thing, and that's the part about this that gets you.
And then we turn around and pour milk on top of it, and milk is sugar as well.
Has sugar in that, right?
And all of this was talked up and bolstered by nutritionists, which, again, they may not have known what they were doing. I believe they knew more than what they shared.
Absolutely.
But it says here, most famously, Fred Stair, who was the founder and director of the nutrition department at Harvard. So this is, the head of the nutrition department there. He would justify the sale of sugar-coated cereals as a means to get kids to drink milk as part of a healthy breakfast, which we also know now that milk isn't even that good for you. We talked in a past video from Dr. Barry about lies our doctor told us about how we really shouldn't even be drinking milk. We're the only mammals on the planet that drink milk as an adult.
And we don't even drink our own milk. At that, we drink
another
animal's milk. Their logic was that it's better that they eat the sugar-coated cereal and get some of the nutrients that are in the cereal
from the milk
than not eating at all.
Right.
So it's better to get a little bit of something than nothing. And they justify that by pouring sugar all over it. Whether they knew it or not, they were doing more damage, more harm than good.
Yeah, they said that children should be allowed to drink sugary chocolate milk because the benefits of obtaining the vitamins and minerals in the milk outweighs any danger that could come from drinking the sugar, which we know now is not true.
It's just a bunch of garbage.
Yeah, that's it. That's what this whole chapter was about. It was, about the soda. It was about the sugary cereals and how that stuff got really introduced into our homes and became a daily...
Yeah, via the refrigerator, the invention of the refrigerator, because it allowed so many of those products to not to be purchased and to be brought into the home.
Cereal didn't have to be refrigerated, but milk, they would eat it dry at first, I think, right?
I don't know. I don't remember if that's what they said, but you're right. Remember, milk at one time was delivered daily to your doorstep.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm sure, and they don't talk about milk production, but again, I'm sure the refrigerator revolutionized that.
Yeah.
So now you got
milk.
Just
keep it in your home.
For long periods of time. And so, of course, yes, you're going to put it on your cereal. It's just part of the growing demand for sugar-coated, products. But the invention of the refrigerator and the war effort, the ability to basically mainline sugar into people's lives and into their stomachs in a very quick and efficient manner. I mean, it just changed the landscape of this whole industry and the whole epidemic that we have that's now sugar.
Yep.
Well, it's such a great chapter. And it's so funny because the good chapters that we've read, the ones that we've really found interesting, have been very short, but man, they're just packed full of vitamins and minerals. I mean, full of good tidbits of information. It's just amazing. And every time I start thinking we're going to hit something in this book that's not going to have my interest, man, they just punch you right in the face with something that's unbelievable. And it's so relevant because we do it today. Cereal and soda today, and fruit juices, those are big business.
Yeah, that is for sure. They are big business.
By the way, these chicken tacos or whatever we had, whatever you want to call them, they were flipping amazing.
Yeah, I'm just going to say it was a chicken taco.
Yeah.
Because it didn't really come out like a quesadilla per se.
Oh my gosh, it tasted good. We're going to have to get that chicken again, so I hope you remember what it is because, wow.
Well, it's in the video
okay.
Because I showed it earlier, so we'll have it in there if we need to. But yeah, it was just on the shelf by the meat at Aldi, so it was very good, very flavorful. And
it was relatively clean, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was. That's the only reason I bought it. If it had like some kind of weird sugar or, maltodextrin or something like that, I wouldn't have bought it. But I am losing steam, guys.
Yeah.
And knowing that I still have to edit this video, I'm sitting here like, oh my goodness.
I still have to go help my parents, so yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to have to wrap it up because it is 9:30. We had no intention of doing this late at night. But
so is the life of internet sensations.
Right.
Oh.
These days just never go how we plan them. We always talk partway through the day and kind of try to strategize our evening. For some reason, it just doesn't go the way that we think it's going to.
But it doesn't stop us from providing you with hours of family fun and entertainment and education.
Right. If you guys like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. If you have not subscribed to our channel, please do that and hit the bell notification so that way when we upload our next video, you'll be alerted to it. You guys have a great day.
Good night. It was good to see you.